And we are live, December 20th, 2021. The SMT Podcast. We got a special Monday edition. And if this ever was to become like a regular segment, Moose, we could just call it Monday Madness with Moose. What do you think, bro?
Monday Madness. I love it. Yeah.
Or Moose Madness. Monday, we could just figure out a fancy, catchy, witty name for the show.
Well, I do love the madness. You know that.
Yeah, we're
So I
into the
think it
madness.
fits. Yeah.
So we do have a good show for you guys. We're going to cover a couple of interesting topics, in my opinion. I think one that kind of, I don't know, maybe because I didn't do a video on it directly, I didn't really cover it per se on like an update. It wasn't, I don't know if it's considered newsworthy, but I think for us as the network tech enthusiast community, I think it's kind of meaningful. I just don't know how meaningful it is to the lay. How much does the average user, the commoner, do they even know whom Ookla is? Do they even know whom RootMetrics is?
Mhm.
So it's like, and that part might go over some people's head, but I think for people that speed test networks and value those applications for testing metrics and such, I think that's important to them. And me and you, Moose, is kind of being like guys that are constantly investigating and poking and prying within the industry. That how we assess a network's performance is meaningful, and these are some of the applications and the organizations that we turn to for data. So um
Well, I mean, a
we
lot
asked
of people.
we got the poll up,
Yeah.
so you guys can go ahead and vote before Moose kind of goes in on it. You guys can see it. It's there in the live chat. Quickly go in there, cast your vote. We're going to close the voting in 10 minutes as me and Moose discuss it and we kind of go over all of it. Go ahead and do that. Place and cast your vote. Let your voice be heard. We ask the question, how do you view the Ookla acquisition of RootMetrics? Your options are good, bad, neutral, or undecided. And wherever you fall into place, make your vote. Moose, first of all, you know all the details. You know about the story. Take me to the very beginning. When you first heard it, what was your initial impression? What were your thoughts?
Well, I woke up to it and I was thinking, this is game changing. And what I mean by that is this: forget about all the biases that people think that there's biases on these testing firms. The fact of the matter is that both of them offer totally different types of a spotlight on their network, all right, on whatever network they're testing. Um, as you know, right, we investigate both reports whenever they come out, right? Root metrics every half of the year, right?
Mm-hmm.
They publish their report. Ookla is a little bit different, right? The carriers have an internal tool that they can all see that this is how they're doing. This is how the network or the market is doing live, right? Per day, even, right? An averaged median type of way, both options. Ookla even does more analytics like the S22 or S21 line, right? This is how they're shaping up. This is how the iPhone 5Gs are shaping up by, right? And that gives kind of like a perspective of analyzing the modems, right? The Qualcomm modem X55, X60, how are they performing on the network versus the competition, the OEM competition, and by carrier. So there's just a lot of data that Ookla has, right? And Ookla was the one to buy RootMetrics, which is very key point. And I know we've talked about this. Why would Ookla buy Root? And I still don't understand why yet, right? Because was Ookla missing a crowdsourced map, right? Like just
Mm-hmm.
like map platform, right? These are just questions off the cuff, right? We know that Ookla gets location data They know exactly where you started your speed test and exactly where you ended your speed test. So they can easily make a map from there. You can get a Google Maps plugin and then plug in your API and boom, it's very simple. So it's not that. I don't think it's the map.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was more of consolidation of the market. Because look at what is happening right now. You have multiple different people, multiple different companies doing these comprehensive analyses of the networks. OpenSignal is one, right? Um, we have Tatella as another one, right? Root, Ookla. There's been others in the past that have shut down, but you get my point, right? Is that there's several different ways of testing the network. So a consolidation might have been in order because it was cheap enough and Root was desperate for a buyer. You never know. That could have happened too.
It's possible. Could have been a
Yeah.
financial situation. I do think that this does make Ookla more of a complete, in terms of assets, right? Like Ookla is a crowdsourced data platform. RootMetrics is independent testing, right? They don't use the data of users. They use the data that they compile in their own independent testing. So that lends itself to be able to control your process. In the case of Ookla, all of their testing is just compilations of speed tests. Whereas with RootMetrics, it was always assessing and addressing and collecting data on several metrics. Downlink speed is one thing, uplink speed is another. Calling is something that RootMetrics assesses. Texting, data reliability, data availability. There's so many things that RootMetrics does that I think makes them a more valuable and relevant testing firm. When I look at Ookla, I just think speed testing, which is the quickest, dirtiest metric of how much capacity a network has. But it doesn't assess or address the user experience. It only addresses the speed of the connection to that application.
Right.
So I always looked at Ookla as just, hey, if my network is slow, I'm going to run a speed test and see if that is confirmed, if it feels and experiences slow. But when I look at RootMetrics, I always looked at it as a scientific process, a collection of data in all of these cities, right? And you're not going to have any type of skewed results because you're not going to have just a few people in a particular market just speed testing the crap out of a specific carrier. So collectively, I view as the new Ookla, which is who knows what they do with it, Moose? Do they even change anything? Does Root just continue to operate on its own accord and Ookla just become the parent company? Or is it somehow going to become an integrated effort where somehow, some way it becomes like Root and Ookla together to build some kind of a conglomerate testing sequence? You know what I mean? Because you've got crowdsource and then you've got independent testing. They're very different. But I do think there is some truth to the possibility of a consolidation. And that's one thing that you and I can agree on. Typically, when you lose competitors within a market, that's just bad in principle. That's bad for the users. That's bad for the consumers that are tracking network performance and such. Because, like, what happens moving forward? Do we see RootMetrics fall off? Do we see Ookla change? That's kind of my concern. Is what happened. I know what Ookla is. I'm worried that something happens to Root because I've always turned to Root for market by market analysis and data. You know what I'm saying, Moose?
You know what I would love, man, is an advanced option on Ookla. Like apparently Sasha Segan on one of the podcasts, I think it was the Best Phone Plans podcast, he mentioned that there's a specific app that you're able to do much more deeper data analytics. Maybe with this partnership, it finally comes out. But you are right, though, Sneed. Consolidations usually are bad for the end user. And in this case, I don't think that they're going to keep them separate. I think they're going to integrate to one because Ookla has a lot of partnerships with worldwide carriers. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The carriers pay Ookla. I don't think the carriers pay Root in the same way.
Carriers pay Root to conduct the testing. Like it's like a wage. It's it's like a contractor. Moose needs his house built. He pays said company to build the house. Right? You're the builder. So they work for them in that sense. If you don't pay RootMetrics, they don't test your network. You'll have missing data, right? So like let's say AT&T and T-Mobile paid RootMetrics to test their networks to drive test. Verizon didn't. There'll be no data on Verizon. It would just be, that's so when people say that RootMetrics is paid, who works for free? Where do they do that at? The last I checked, that would be slavery, working for free. That would be volunteering. Nobody's going to volunteer tens of thousands of dollars of equipment on a single vehicle. Nobody's going to volunteer to just pay people's salary to drive around and test these networks for 10 to 12 hours a day, probably 10 or 11 months out of the year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why I used to chuckle and laugh when T-Mobile used to say, oh, well, they're paid by Verizon. Well, yeah, so you pay them too, because they have your data as well.
Again, it's the hype of the propaganda. It's not even marketing; it's propaganda at that point.
Carlos has concerns. He says RootMetrics may not be unbiased anymore if Ookla has their way.
Hopefully.
Manny chimes in. The problem is when someone sponsors something to these metric companies and then they have to be sneaky biased in favor of carrier. Yeah, unfortunately, Manny, I can't speak to all testing firms, but I can tell you that you can feel confident in what RootMetrics does because there are several contracts and employees that are either given bonuses or they lose bonuses based on RootMetrics performance. Moose, there are engineers out there for the big 3, big 4 carriers. Whether or not they get a certain bonus depends on the RootMetric awards of their market.
Yep.
So that tells you it matters. It's no joke. Right?
I remember that when I was working for the T-Mobile RAN team for LA, that there were KPIs, right? Performance index scores, right? Mm-hmm. That would be tracked hourly, daily, monthly. And if there's issues, significant issues, that hurts everybody on the team because, again, like you just said, bonuses, man, money talks. Money talks. But here's the problem. And this is the biggest issue is like, what about if you can't fix those issues, dog? Because the issue is not fixable because you don't have the money. For example, voice over LTE issues. That's only fixed with money. Building another cell site, putting CRAN, putting in building solutions.
Yes.
You can't tweak a cell site enough. And by the way, to send somebody out there to fix the position of an antenna costs money.
Yeah.
So, you better pray or something, or whoever is your deity, that the wind blows in a certain direction to adjust the antenna azimuth.
Right.
But in reality, man.
All right. So right. Manny asks a good question. This is solid. He says he knows it matters, and I think we all do. How's it different from JD Power and Associates? Basically, the only difference I know about JD Power is I think that's consumer feedback. So that's the consumer perception, I think, Manny, which is an interesting angle that tells you how customers feel about their wireless provider. So like, do customers have apathy towards their carrier, or do they have, you know, do they promote their carrier as something that they enjoy and like? Would they recommend to their friends and family? Stuff like that. And you also brought in the FCC piece. As long as the applications and the software is good, I think any entity can put together some good data, right? It just needs to be real data. It can't be, manipulated. It can't be tricked, tomfoolery. People do some weird things. Let's be honest, there are some really strange people out there that would try to swing things one way or the other, right? I think that's just the nature of the beast. But go ahead and get your final votes in the live chat. Chime in on this. This is the opportunity, the voice of the people, the SMT Nation. Go ahead and cast your vote. How do you view the Ookla acquisition of RootMetrics? We got 53 votes. We're going to go ahead and close that out in about 10 seconds. Get your final votes in. Do you see it as good? Do you see it as bad? Do you see it as, are you more neutral on it, or are you undecided? Right. Totally agree, Pete. The FCC needs to do better.
Mhm.
I will tell you that I think this version of the SEC has already shown signs of being better in that respect. I'm just calling a spade, but the book is still needs to be written on it. It's still early in their time, so we'll have to wait and see.
Other countries more ahead of our 5G deployment, like South Korea, they have weekly and monthly updates on where the carriers are at in terms of small cell deployment and macro deployment and cell site upgrades per month. How come we don't have that transparency? Like, that's next level, man.
Yeah, but isn't that the way it should be? That's more of like culture,
A
right?
check.
That's more. Yes.
That's a check
Yeah.
on it's just like checks and balances. If you say that you did X, Y, and Z, okay, put it on paper to make sure that it's legit. Just like the SEC checks on the carriers, that are you guys even, doing the right practices when you get, and then like the carriers are getting checked on the marketing language now, right? For example, most reliable 5G network. What the hell does that mean? That's not even something you can measure.
That is true. I guess you could say, well, in how many markets does your wireless network prove to be the most reliable? How else do you measure it, right, Moose?
Well, I mean, reliability to me is not a measure of connectivity in the sense of fast speeds. It's not about that. It's about if you can actually use your service and it is 5G, not some pseudo 5G. You know what I mean?
Right.
Availability is, does my phone drop to LTE at any time? And again, that's all dependent on if the cell sites are congested or not, because there are mitigation tactics where you will drop down to LTE because it's not as congested as 5G. So that's also a skewed situation, right? That's when you have to like airplane mode to see if 5G is in that area. Oh, it is. Boom. Of course, I anticipate that once C-band is turned on, that the 5G availability will actually go higher because more people will be offloaded from the low band 5G to the mid band 5G.
Well, let's go ahead and check out this, see the poll results, Moose, and let's talk about it quickly. We'll just kind of recap the results and see how the community sees it. How do you view the Ookla acquisition of RootMetrics? Majority, good, 37%. The next was at 25%, was neutral. Then we have bad thing at 18% and undecided at 18%. So there's a little bit of, I don't know, I'd say there's a little bit of balance there. I think for the people that said, like the 37% that say it's good, they see the potential of having multiple types of data aggregated to form a more comprehensive outlook into network performance. So I think they're right to be optimistic. If it was executed properly, that would make Ookla not only the speed test data king, but it also gives them that independent, scientifically analyzed network performance testing, not just a collection of data from speed tests run by end users. Because the problem with the users is they have old equipment. Ookla can compile the data from every phone on every network that runs an Ookla speed test. So that's going to be a OnePlus 7, a OnePlus 6, a Moto E4, an iPhone 7, right? All of that, including the new ones. But RootMetrics only uses the newest Galaxy devices in their testing, right? So they're going to go to the store, they're going to pick up an S21 Ultra for each network with the best, highest priority SIM card and plan, and they're going to test, right? So they're different. So if you were to integrate the testing, and combine like a more full and compiled report, I think that's meaningful. So I think that's maybe where people are going with that.
I remember, like I told you, Ookla has filters, right, where you can specifically see all the S21 tests, all the iPhone 12 or iPhone 13 tests, right? And at the end of the day, what's the first app that you download, Sneed? Is it the speedtest.net, Ookla speed test app, or
It
the
used to be.
RootMetrics app?
It used to be. I actually don't use the RootMetrics app. I only access the reports. I don't use the app itself. I use the Ookla app for speed testing, so I also use fast.com. But my go-to cellular app is actually Signal Check Pro. I'm looking at
Right, right.
cell sites, I'm looking at bandwidth and channels and frequencies, but maybe my use case is different because of what I do on my channel. Maybe it's a little different.
I think it is. I mean, as a regular consumer, first of all, a regular consumer, average, would probably never even download the speed test app. Let's be honest here.
They might go to the Google speed test app, right?
Yeah.
They might.
They might go to Google speed test or whatever, see the speed test. But I will say this, somebody who is somewhat in the know, because obviously some people test their Wi-Fi speed, right? To see if their Wi-Fi speed is decent
Sure.
enough.
Yeah, or if
They
they're
would have,
getting what they're paying for, right?
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I'm willing to say that this Ookla speed test app might be the app. But RootMetrics is very interesting because they have data crowdsourced from years now, and some of that data is outdated, significantly outdated.
Sure.
So I know there was comments where it finally could have like a clean slate protocol, wipe everything and start gathering new information. What do you think, Sneed?
I think the bottom line here is, where do we really think this becomes a collusion risk, Moose, between the two companies? That's my only fear. Is there a collusion risk here where the credibility of both either, like, does that come into play here? That's my
What do you
only
mean?
true concern. I think everything you mentioned is right. I think every, if we look at this as like check boxes, everything you named was factually accurate. But are we losing credibility to both or either one of these platforms?
I don't think it's a credibility loss. I think that we have to be very careful. Because like I said, and like we said previous times, when you remove a competitor or when you remove another way to check, you are essentially reducing the visibility, the different types of visibility. Like, for example, Ookla might say, you know what? You're no longer doing that type of analysis. We're doing something more cost effective because clearly you guys were needing to sell the company because it was costing you guys too much money. right? Like, I'm just thinking about it from a business sense. Why did they sell, Sneed? Why would they sell if everything was rosy? And it's
Well, I
never
don't
been, yeah.
I can tell you it probably didn't go like this. RootMetrics probably did not approach Ookla, but I think it was more likely Ookla approaching Root and, over several months of discussions, they probably, Root was probably like, well, I mean, we can continue doing what we're doing and, they're going to be a parent company. They're basically investing in us, right? Now, does that mean that RootMetrics is no longer has a ceiling as a firm? Maybe, but maybe that's all they wanted to do. Maybe that was their only end game. Maybe there was no ambition to become as big as Ookla. Like Ookla is the bigger company. They're the A side in this transaction, correct?
Well, yeah, they're the A
Okay.
side.
Right, they're the A side in this. So, RootMetrics being the B side, being a smaller company, just look at the market cap of the companies. I don't even know if RootMetrics publicly trades. I think Ookla used to publicly trade and then they went private. This is just a typical good old corporate transaction in which I think big bank eating little bank, and I don't know. At the end of the day, I think we'll just have to wait and see to see how it plays out, Moose, because we don't know what Ookla's intention is. We don't know what they
Mm.
want to do, you know. King Sniper chimes in. Ookla speed test app plus root metrics coverage map equals greatness. I like that combo too, Moose. What do you think?
Uh, Again, um, we don't know if the Ookla speed test app is going to be integrating the root metrics information, or are they going to completely scrap that information from root, right? Maybe it's costing too much money to have that crowdsourced data out there without any advertisements. Remember this, Sneed. Nothing is free, and you've said
Nothing.
this.
Nothing.
Nothing is
Somebody's
free. So
somebody's paying somehow, some way.
correct. So how are they monetizing their data that they have?
They have to sell it.
You know, right? But what I'm saying is that you told me earlier, Root has people on salary that they go to these different markets and they buy
Mhm.
the S21 and they do the testing. So
Mhm.
why do we need crowdsourced testing then?
Well, it's
Why would?
it's a different it's a different methodology, you
But
know?
my point is that I don't think it's going to be there much longer, dog. There's a reason why they sold. I think it's business reasons.
Well, I mean, to just eliminate the entity, or is it to enhance your own product portfolio?
I think it was a cheap enough transaction. They had some relationships that Ookla does not have, or they had a platform that Ookla wanted. But think about it like this, dog. As an example, the bakery, right?
Mhm.
If a bigger company is going to come out and buy you out, why would you buy? Or sorry, why would you sell? If not because enough's enough, I don't want to do this anymore. It was enough money to step away from, or there were obvious trends in the market like there are right now where I'm not bringing in as much money as last year or the previous years. It's time for me to sell and GTFO.
And then here's Alexis kinda coming in on a different angle.
Mm-hmm.
I see them recognizing that 5G will be a part of the internet, and they will need totally different measurements. Yeah, I mean, what
Yep.
would the crowd what im how important is crowdsourced speed testing when 5G is probably going to be as important towards latency than it is about just downlink capacity and speeds, right? Maybe Root has their R&D team working on some new processes, some new data collection strategies. They could be onto something, and Ookla recognized it and scooped them up like Haagen-Dazs, bro.
Yeah.
Maybe Alexis is right. Maybe we are looking at this wrong. All right. Well, we'll move on from that. Good discussion, though, Moose. I think that was a solid topic. Good call on your part. Got to give you your credit on that. And the next poll is up. If you guys want to go ahead, get into the live chat box, you will see the most recent poll was posted 10 minutes ago. We currently have 42 votes. I do see 63 people here in the live, so if you want to go ahead and do that, go ahead and chime in. You all have the voice of the people, the SMT Nation. Cast your vote so your voice can be heard. Does AT&T have the wireless assets to compete with T-Mobile and Verizon? We have 4 options for you. Yes, that would mean they have what it takes to compete with both T-Mobile and Verizon. Or your other option is no, they do not have the assets to compete with T-Mobile and Verizon.
Holistically.
And then I took it one step further, Moose. Yes to T-Mobile, but not Verizon. Yes to Verizon, but not T-Mobile. So I made it even more specific. Hopefully not too confusing.
Thankfully, we don't have shills here because right now the last option is it's not doing hot. The last option.
Yeah. It's I think this is an interesting question because here's how I look at this question, Moose. What do you view as wireless assets? My answer to that is very dynamic.
Right.
The first thing we can all point to is spectrum. Spectrum licenses. How much C-band has AT&T invested in? And by C-band, I mean the whole band frequency, right? 3.7, Spectrum Auction 107. Also, the most recent DoD Spectrum Auction 110, right? We have to kind of play predictor there because we don't have confirmation as to how much spectrum each carrier has or won. I think the other question to be answered is when they do officially, also do the 3.1 gigahertz auction, what happens there? So the only thing we could do is we know what they have as of the last spectrum auction. We can speculate what AT&T likely did for Spectrum Auction 110. We also know what they have in millimeter wave, right? So you can kind of aggregate all of those things and then just try to use the most realistic and logical thinking process how things may shake out. Now, that's spectrum only, Moose. What about fiber? What about networking engineers as a resource? Is skill, talent, and knowledge, research and development, does that also get valued here? I think it does. Does experience matter?
So lots of different key points, and I love it. The way that I've always been told.
Supply chain moves?
Well, that's another big thing too. I mean, we've talked about this
2021, 2022, right?
Yeah, we've talked about this. A lot of people forget that to build a wireless network, there's various parts to this thing, that all have to come together. The same way that I've experienced it with, for example, your fiber build out, right, Sneed? A lot of things have to come together perfectly in order for a light from a central office to be pushed through the network eventually to get to your BGW320, right? And if there's any issues within that process, we'll have to go back and troubleshoot essentially, right, Sneed? In this case, wireless, what's the most critical thing, Sneed, that you've told me since day one, that if you don't have this for 5G, you will have long-term issues. If you don't have,
it's two things. It's fiber and it's tower density.
Exactly. You've said this literally since I met you, a long time ago now.
I really feel, Moose, that if you have one of those two things, you have a chance. If you have both of them, you are leading the pack.
Right. One of the things that Stanky always says is that AT&T is not a wireless company. That blew my mind when Stanky said this. AT&T is not a wireless company. AT&T has wireless in its name at one point. AT&T Wireless, singular wireless, right? Like there's wireless was in the name. AT&T is the acronym, if people don't know, American Telephone and Telegraph, right? But it's not a wireless company. That's mind-blowing, right? Is because he's going back in time, and realistically, AT&T is a wireline company, which means today that particular type of technology is fiber.
Well, Moose, they were always the telephone company,
Mm-hmm.
and the telephone was replaced by the smartphone. You know, it was replaced by the mobile phone, I should say.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was just a natural evolution of what their business was. They remained the wireline company. That has not changed. They impersonated a media company, and that totally backfired, and it costed them the better part of a decade and a half, in my opinion. I don't think we'll see a full AT&T recovery until 2025, back to its golden era, right? I think they need a few years still. And Wall Street has to stop looking at them as the mistake that happened on Wall Street, right? So, but yeah, I agree. You know, you're spot on in your assessment of the wireline, the fiber, the telephone, and their wireless ambitions. You know?
Now, I also do want to agree on everything that you said on the bullet points, right? Do you have the supply chain? Do you have the supply chain? If you don't have the supply chain, there's a big problem, right? Because you're not going to be able to upgrade your cell sites. You're not going to be able to source enough equipment for the new cell sites or new equipment for the existing cell site. Do you have the right people on the ground for the permitting, for the, local, government type issues, right? Certain municipalities, they don't want to put a cell site in certain areas, or small cells. They don't want to see anything. They don't want to see anything, right? You said something additional as well. Do you have the long-term vision of densification? And it's not just macro sites. That's the problem.
Well, actually, the 5G game is not a macro game.
Exactly.
The 5G game it's small cells, it's nodes, it's DAS systems, it's indoor, outdoor festivals, concerts. It's the entire thing. It's a capacity game, it's a latency thing, it's a network core operations thing. It's network slicing. You know, it's AR, VR, it's application support. It's innovative use cases, it's mech. You know, it's edge computing. It's Moose, it's even more than we know, right?
It's
So
true.
so where does AT&T stack up with all of those things? You know, I like their place in the supply chain. They basically own Corning for one factory of production.
Yeah.
And they've got contracts in place with Nokia, Ericsson, and Samsung. They've got the big deal with Corning. They've got contractors galore, you know, for labor and work, you know, and manpower. I see them, you know, when I look at these options in this live in the poll, you guys can go ahead and cast your vote. We're going to close it out in a minute. Does AT&T have the wireless assets to compete with T-Mobile and Verizon?
And I wanted to ask you, because you're way better in analogies and all these storytellings than I am. But let me see if I can put the SMT, hat on for a second.
Huh.
Sneed, let me ask you this. Imagine you are a water company, okay? Like a water municipality company, or even better, an electricity company, right? And you don't own your poles. You don't own the cabling, the distribution, essentially. of the electricity. You don't own the pipes for the water. The only thing you own is the faucet or the electrical plug, the end result, right? And what I'm trying to say by this is this. T-Mobile does not have fiber, their own fiber. They have to lease it from someone else, whether that's Crown Castle, AT&T, in some cases Verizon, CenturyLink, all of these other fiber providers, okay, Frontier, etc. They have to lease it from somebody because they don't have their own, number one. Number two, again, do you own significant amounts of infrastructure on top of that? Another example, back in the day before the tower companies got all the business, right? Because the carriers sold off their tower ownerships, right? Their tower ownerships, they leased, they're now like, it's the same way like in a building, right? So like instead of owning the building, you're just leasing a floor, a couple floors of the building, right?
Correct.
It's cheaper, right? Instead of it being a capital asset.
Then it's an operating asset. Exactly.
Right. So, but before then, both Verizon and AT&T owned their cell sites, right? Owned it holistically. Then they sold it off to American Tower, Crown Castle, SB, there's other ones, right? So that means that back in the day, they had the owner's economics of where to put the cell sites. Now, T-Mobile is co-locating, and I think that's the best decision they've ever made, because you don't want to be building new cell sites because that's cost significantly more money. Just don't reinvent the wheel. Put it on a Verizon pole. Put it, where existing Verizon's at. Put it on an AT&T pole where AT&T's already at. If AT&T is getting paid by the government to do FirstNet in the middle of nowhere, you should be right there with them.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. Matching.
But the problem is always going to be, can you get your fiber there? Crown Castle is your number one right now. And Crown does not have fiber everywhere.
They do not. They have to go to the local ILEC in that case.
Exactly. Or what I've noticed as well, you're going to have to get microwave backhaul.
Which is the last resort.
Exactly. So that's an issue, right? If you don't have, and here's another reason why I bring this up about the metaphor. If Verizon is the top for overall platform connectivity, right? You know what I mean? Like they're the Rolls Royce, they're the Lambo, right? Right? They secured their future because guess what? The Verizon One project, they're putting fiber to all their sites, to all their CRAN.
Within the states, they run their fiber miles.
Well,
right?
Even in Texas, I've seen it. Verizon has,
but they've had fiber in Texas for a while, Moose.
Right, MCI, right? Yeah. The MCI fiber, wherever they can get it.
Remember Frontier fame, they had fiber pre-existing.
So my point that I'm trying to make is this, man. If Verizon didn't think it was a good idea, they wouldn't have done it. They wouldn't invest the money, right? But they know.
But Verizon also looked outside the box, Moose.
Mm-hmm.
They also are looking at IAB. The sheer amount of spectrum assets that they have in mid-band and also the millimeter wave allows them flexibility to daisy chain microwave backhaul over millimeter wave. Right? So they can essentially run fiber to one site and then utilize wireless spectrum in ultra high frequencies like 39 gigahertz for dedicated fiber. And Moose, let's call a spade. 1,000 megahertz of backhaul millimeter wave is an absolutely tremendous amount of speed. We're probably talking about 10 gigabit per second backhaul over wireless. They could do that. They could daisy chain sites in the middle of nowhere on one single fiber strand through IAB.
That's right.
So
And by the way,
let's call a spade one last time. Everybody made a big stink about Project Air Gig. I'm sorry, but I never believed in that project. I believed in IAB, and I think I'm going to be right about it.
yeah, the Project Air Gig was a prototype, right? And that's why Sneed was absolutely correct that it was conceptualized by a company that's not doing manufacturing. If it was Ericsson that came up with the Air Gig, then of course it would have been a different story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then now let me just point this out because there is a misconception in the live chat. Yes, certain carriers, ISPs, have certain fiber in certain cities because that's consumer fiber. We're talking about enterprise fiber to the macro. Totally different situation.
Sure. Yeah.
Totally different. We're talking about two different fibers, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Commercial fiber.
Commercial fiber to the cell sites is totally different than fiber in the 16 states because that's consumer, like, Pittsburgh, where Dennis is at. Like that is
or
consumer
Cleveland
fiber.
or Columbus. Yeah.
Right. That's totally different than to the cell site because that has less regulation, all this other nonsense. Okay. So I just wanted to make that out there because Verizon has their own fiber to the majority of their sites. That is a fact now. Okay. They're still waiting on a lot more.
Well, what I think Verizon does, Moose, is when they find out that there's a fiber company doing an installation, they get in on it.
Exactly.
And then they have their fiber laid out, in these conduits that are getting pushed into the ground anyway. Yeah.
I'm loving this poll, man. 70 folks. 71.
Yeah, let's go ahead and finalize those votes as we kind of conclude on this conversation. I think the last thing to mention here is, when we were talking about the fiber assets and Verizon and AT&T, the assets, they're also deploying differently, right? Like Verizon is going to be doing fixed wireless access. That needs a lot of spectrum. T-Mobile wants to do fixed wireless access as well. That needs a lot of spectrum. They need a lot of tower sites. They need a lot of spectrum. They need to densify. They're going to be dealing with more capacity strain. AT&T has no such pressures. AT&T is going to be focusing on deploying their fiber and getting fiber line customers, not fixed wireless customers.
Right.
The day will never come where the AT&T network is going to be congested in the future. It just won't.
Now, let me add to what Sneed is saying because I completely agree with this. Unlike other carriers globally that don't have their own fiber, a carrier that has their own fiber, if there's a congestion point, like for example, let's say downtown Cleveland, right, Sneed, there's a site. Even with C-band, all the things are flowing 100%. It's still congested. Well, guess what? No problem.
Wave node.
We'll add the millimeter wave. We'll increase the backhaul.
Right.
We'll increase the backhaul. We'll add CRAN. Boom. Why? How is it so simple that I just said those three things?
Because your fiber is there.
Exactly. The fiber is already there. I don't have to build out more fiber.
Yes, that is correct.
I don't have to build out. Crown Castle has to build out every single point, whether that's going to the macro site or that's going to the CRAN or that's going to the in-building solution, because they don't have their own already there. That's what Sneed is saying.
Yeah, and Sebi, you're right. We can't lose focus on that. The supply chain is crucial.
Yes.
The supply chain can, it's like a hose that becomes crimped. If you know how people, bottle up and tie up the hose, Moose, like you're going to cut off the flow.
I know
everybody can have big dreams and they got all these plans, Moose, and if the supplies aren't there, they're stuck in limbo.
One of the things that I will say is that, remember that analogy that I've been saying spectrum is like a freeway, right? Where on AT&T sites, there's 8 lanes right now, right? 8 lanes of different spectrum brands. With millimeter wave and C-band coming, and when I say specifically C-band, N77, okay? There's a additional 2 more lanes coming, right? Eventually, depending on the phones and the capabilities, you'll be able to navigate those spectrum bands much better than what we're at right now. Because I know that King Sniper's comment of there is a significant congestion issue. And that's the case because more and more people are signing on into the network every day. More and more people enjoy the discounts compared to Verizon or compared to T-Mobile even. But the only way to fix the problem at this particular moment in time is upgrading your phone. The C-band will be turned on January 5th, supposedly. That's what's supposedly going to happen. If the C-band's not turned on, C-RAN is not being deployed, and this is all you can get right now, then there's really not much more they can do. Same thing with Verizon here in Southern California. See, I've told you this, right? Verizon's super congested here. The only way that they're going to fix the problem is C-band and 77.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a fact. There's no other way to deploy more speed at that point. That's a congestion issue. The density is amazing
Sure.
for Verizon here. The density is amazing. We've talked about this.
But they are spectrum starved, right?
Exactly. It's congested to the point where people are getting frustrated. But the C-band is turning on within 2 weeks, supposedly, January 5th. But again, it's an issue of the supply chain. We have to be patient because not everybody has all of these equipments in stock. Everybody's ordering them globally.
Moose, I think what boils down to is that the stock, there's no back stock. There's no availability. Literally, when production is shipped, it's gone. It's off the shelf. It's already accounted for. It's already been casted out from inventory and it's being delivered. There's nothing sitting. We're going straight from production into boxes, onto containers, into trucks. There's no warehouse. It's never seeing a shelf. Everything literally is getting pushed out immediately. There is no surplus. There is no extra. They are probably giving people half of what they're ordering. I would not be surprised if in 2021, Verizon put an order to have 20,000 sites upgraded and secured in terms of equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no way in hell they are getting that. They probably got less than half. And I would be shocked if somehow, some way, Verizon has more than 10,000 sites upgraded by March. I would be shocked.
Now, the other thing that I was going to mention is this. If Verizon was the most aggressive with their C-band expansion vocally, right, on these investor conferences and everything like that, that's because they were the ones that were like, we want to spend the most. We have the most amount of money right now. Let's get it done, right? That was back in probably March, June timeframe, right? Somewhere around there.
Right.
Probably even further back, like January, let's say, right? Nobody knew what was going to happen with these supply chain issues. But
well, I think we knew. I think most people knew there was, but to the extent was unknown, possibly.
The one thing that I can say is this, man. Nobody knew how bad the supply chain was going to be this year until it actually happened, right? Because even Apple was like, oh yeah, we're going to have the phones, we're going to have everything. But guess what? they're still out of stock today,
Right.
months later from launch. And this is not a normal situation, because normally by December, the stock would have been enough by now. But there's still 2-week delays, 3-week delays on certain models, certain, capacities, right? So think about it like that. Apple, that is always the one to say accurately, we're going to be ordering 19 million phones or 25 million phones or 100 million. No, they were like 100 and some million phones. They were not even able to get what they needed. The chip shortage is real.
It really
and unfortunately, we're dealing with this across the board.
Yep. Every industry, every business, every supplier, every seller, every wholesaler, every retailer, every consumer. The whole shebang.
And it goes back to, I think I was reading a New York Times article regarding the shortage, and it was corroborated by the Wall Street Journal. Whichever company ordered their product back in 2019 in anticipation for what they needed in 2021, that's the company that actually got their shipments the fastest. For example, Xbox, right? Xbox ordered more Xbox Series X's because they knew that they were going to beat for the first time the PlayStation in terms of market share because of the Game Pass, the ultimate Game Pass, right? That you could just download whatever game like Netflix, play it, delete it, download another one, you know? It's all dependent on how much hard drive space you have.
Here's the thing, Moose.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're giving up all these examples. I mean, you're just talking gaming consoles. What about computers?
Yeah.
The laptops, the tablets, the iPads, the
GPUs,
phones. Yes.
you know?
And Moose, I'm convinced, even if we didn't have a several month shutdown due to pandemic, I still think we'd have shortages too. Maybe it wouldn't be as bad, but I still think we'd have them. I think the demand is just that freaking high right now.
You know, you see, Kazi says it best. Everything's out of stock.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
PS5s, Xbox, GPUs are out of stock.
Sure.
So when Levendi's saying that certain companies are taking the shortage too far, I don't think that's the case, man.
I think some is extremely bad, and others are just bad.
Right. There's different levels of bad, and right now it's none of them are normal.
Don't you feel like that's the way of the times right now, Moose? There's bad, and then there's just awful, right?
You know what's the other thing, Sneed? When we have Buffalo Wild Wings saying we have a shortage on chicken wings.
I've heard that, dude. Is this real life?
It is. I went to the Buffalo Wild Wings this weekend. I had to compromise, dog. I'm serious. I was like, come on, man.
So you
can't. Yeah.
Like they let you order like a dozen wings?
They only allowed me to get a limited amount. And they were not even wings, dog. They were thighs.
What?
So I was like, it's a lot more meat, right? Because a thigh is bigger than a wing. But that's not what I ordered. So I was like, you know what? It is what it is. These are the times.
Unbelievable. Hashtag thighs. Hashtag wings.
I'm telling you. Look.
Oh, my goodness.
But my point that I'm trying to make, going back to the analogy, okay, of it's if you don't have your infrastructure owned by you and completely determined by you, then you're going to be running into issues like we're facing across the board here. For example, Buffalo Wild Wings can't get enough chicken wings because they're getting it from a distributor, correct? That distributor has to distribute to all these other restaurants on top of Buffalo Wild Wings, even though they might be number one, right? The biggest client. Same thing's going to happen with Ericsson, with Nokia. They have shortages on the equipment. They can't get enough. So whichever one pays the most amount of money is going to get the equipment. Same thing with fiber. Corning only has a significant portion of their factories. They're probably going 24 hours a day, right? They're fiber spools, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But depending on who ordered whatever, is going to go to whichever company. I have a buddy, Sneed, that works for Niagara Water Bottle. Okay, I don't know if you know Niagara. They're the number one private bottled water distributor in the United
Sure.
States.
Yeah.
They do all the different types of water.
They just brand it, they
Aquafina.
stamp it, do
Yeah,
the
yeah, it's the
stickers.
same
Right.
water at the end of the day. Like there's no secret to this. It's the same water. It's just different bottle, different thickness in plastic, and slightly different minerals to make it taste slightly different. But my point that I'm trying to make is this. Even a water bottle company is having shortages on expanding their operations because they can't get enough equipment, because the equipment also uses chips. And where's the chips coming from? The same place where everybody else's chips are coming from.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely true. Big shout out to Kamikaze Kid. Threw us the super sticker. Thanks for that, Dono. Appreciate you. And yeah, we got the Monday night show. We got Monday Madness with Moose. You know?
I love that. By the way, since we're about to close the poll, right, Sneed?
Are there wings made of computer chips? Oh, never.
Since we're about to close the poll, Sneed,
Let's
it's
go
up
ahead
to
and
you
close the
whenever.
poll. Get your vote in. 10
Remember,
seconds to get your vote in. Moose,
you know
cue the
what's coming,
music.
dog.
That's right.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Does AT&T have the wireless assets to compete with T-Mobile and Verizon? Yes. No. Yes to T-Mobile, but not Verizon. Yes to Verizon, but not T-Mobile. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. 3, 2, 1. Poll is ended. We shall see what the results are. Moose, I'm going to tell you where I stand. They absolutely have the assets to compete in 5G. I think they have the biggest advantage in 5G, which is the owner of fiber. I think
And this
that
is
is
the sneak
their
take.
that is the ace in the hole. That is the Sneed take. The fiber ownership is the single biggest advantage that they have. I think it is it's like security. It's like an insurance plan. You can't lose if you own the fiber because you're going to monetize the fiber both commercially with business, enterprise, and residential, and you're also going to leverage it for your wireless. You can't lose. The only company that is at risk, in my opinion, of struggling in 5G is T-Mobile's lack of fiber ownership. I think eventually they just have to change their approach to this. It just won't work long term. So at some point, they have to look at that and make a decision. Now, from a spectrum position, T-Mobile is strong. They consumed Sprint. They took 40, 50 million customers, eliminated a carrier, took all of their sub 6 gigahertz spectrum, gets them the, out ahead of the 5G leadership or whatever. And that was to their advantage. But once other carriers have sizable spectrum holdings dedicated for 5G channels, then what do they have? I know what AT&T has. They have fiber. I know what Verizon has. They have fiber. So once that spectrum gap closes, then what do you have?
And that's something that, we've been talking about, that this 2022 is going to be very transformative. No longer will T-Mobile be able to claim these ridiculous awards that they're the number one speed, because again, you mentioned it earlier in the stream, speed is just an indication of capacity.
Moose, I just went to a rural tower site today. Brand new T-Mobile upgrade. Very nice site. Brand new upgrade. Clean, wired well, fully optimized site.
Right.
There was nobody on the tower. And you know how I knew?
Yep.
I was stuck at 750 megabits per second. No deviation. 750, 750, 750. What does that tell you about the backhaul on that site, Moose?
It means that it's definitely, a 5 gig.
No, it's a 1 gig.
It's capping it at the gig, right? Because obviously the other portions of the 1 gig are going to LTE, frequencies. But I'm not surprised, Sneed. Not surprised whatsoever.
Now, they don't obviously,
know?
like I'm testing the tower and it's stuck at 750. That means there's not a lot of market share for them there. There's not a lot of users on that site. Maybe
Right.
at times there's little surges, but it was middle of the day, Moose, 4:00. No
You know
traffic
what?
on the site.
You
The
know what's funny?
N71 was doing 200 megabits.
You you know what's funny is that I've tested sites here with T-Mobile where and then you brought up something huge to me, man, is that 100 megahertz of bandwidth, the frequency bandwidth, right, that they have, right? The slice of N41 that they have on air. Some sites have 10 gig backhaul. And the best they're able to do is 750 because the site is completely uncongested. Nobody's on it. Because in certain suburbs, nobody even cares about T-Mobile. Let's be completely realistic here. There's certain cities that will never change from Verizon, or they'll never change from AT&T.
But here's the thing,
You
Moose.
know?
Like in the case of my testing today, T-Mobile can get away with that, right? On that site in that scenario. But they can't do that in the city. They can't do that in NYC, in Philly,
No,
in Boston, in
no,
Dallas, in
no,
LA, in Cleveland proper. They can't skimp out on backhaul.
no.
And once they get to that 25 gig mark, it's expensive, bro.
Extreme. And here's the other thing that I was going to tell you,
That's
Sneed,
some
and you know
pretty
this.
high-end OpEx, right, Moose?
It's extremely expensive per circuit for 25 gigs. I mean, just to give you an idea, I'm already on record saying that AT&T is probably going to come out with 400 gigs next year in 2022.
But that's enterprise business commercial, right?
To the cell sites, they've
It's incredible.
already, Verizon and AT&T are going to probably be the first companies in the world to introduce 100 gig backhaul to the cell site because the demand is there, man. The demand is so great.
I have to call a spade, Moose.
Yeah.
I think T-Mobile's done a nice job of upgrading the backhaul here recently. I
Right.
have seen the 100 megahertz channels finally get pushed a little bit. 750 on these newer sites. I have not seen gigabit speed, so I can't. I think they're being, they're paying for the fiber that they need. They're not paying for excessive amounts of it when it comes to the speed. But see, that's the position they're in, right? AT&T's in a different position.
Yeah. Verizon and AT&T on average would probably have in the same market significantly more people connected to a cell site than T-Mobile. So they would need to have a significant backhaul upgrade to combat the congestion, So it's just shocking to me, man, that 100 megahertz of spectrum, 10 gig backhaul, still only 750. It's nuts.
I don't
Just
think it's
wait.
getting 10 gig backhaul. I think
No.
each sector is getting 1 gig.
And you know why I know that that's the case? Because we got our buddy Zero Cool that confirmed the backhaul, and I'm like shocked. There's no
Moose,
way.
I've speculated that some sectors
Yeah,
get different backhaul.
that's possible. Very possible.
Where like one sector maybe gets a gig and another sector might get 3 gig, and like, so I wouldn't be surprised if one got a less than a gig, if one stayed on legacy fiber, and didn't get
The other
upgraded.
issue,
Huh?
the other issue that our buddy Zero Cool also mentioned, and this is not gonna be surprising for you, but it's probably gonna blow the mind to some of the listeners. Southern California for T-Mobile is an Ericsson market. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
And he's confirmed that there's a Nokia routing equipment at the cell site. What the heck is Nokia doing on an Ericsson equipment site?
How
No
does it
way.
operate? How does it perform?
How this is some
Wait,
craziness,
do they
man.
even talk? Like, does that work?
Apparently, I think
That's like
where the
impersonating
bottleneck is.
Open RAN, dude.
And then they're saying that they're not into Open RAN. Remember that?
Yeah.
T-Mobile, that crazy Australian guy, he's like, "Oh yeah, we're not doing open RAN and all this nonsense." I started laughing. I'm like, "Well, I don't know what the hell are you doing with your network, dude, but you guys have
Are
Nokia
you
and
talking
Ericsson."
about Neville the Pebble?
Neville the down under Ray. The guy is from Australia and he's talking out of his ass, straight up. I mean, it's like he has no idea what the hell is going on in his network if there's Nokia equipment on an Ericsson site. Doesn't make sense.
Me and Pete have had conversations. We think maybe Neville's lost his edge over the years. We kind of think he might be slightly burnt out, just to call it in a nice way. A little burnt out.
I don't know. It's just unbelievable. And I know Sebi's going to apologize for them every time because I know they never officially said that they're going to do it or not do it. But the fact that they've been asked multiple times and there's no answer, that is alarming.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. Now, let me ask you, are we doing a third poll? Because I'm itching for a third poll, man. I was going to ask you, when are we going to do the predictions for 2022?
The timing is really on you, Moose. I mean, if you're kind of calling the shots, I like to empower the Moose, man.
Well,
do you want to do a Monday? Do you want to do a Monday Madness next week and do it then?
We need more voices for the poll. I mean, we're gonna do a special edition of the SMT podcast on the 31st.
Hold on, Moose. You're getting called out by the homie Sebi, bro.
Let me see. Let me see. What did he say?
He's calling Cap right now.
I'm telling you, man. There's too many sources that have said one thing, they're saying another thing, and they're doing another thing. Doesn't make sense.
Well, we've seen that plenty of times. I mean, they've completely backtracked on millimeter wave. They know they need it. They had no other option. It didn't fit the narrative of 5G coverage, right? It didn't fit the narrative of 5G for all, cover the country, 700 trillion pops of coverage on the moon. It didn't fit that whole narrative. They're more inclined to speak out of both sides of their mouth based on the needs of the moment. We know that all carriers lie, but nobody has had to backtrack more because of the extent to which they took it.
Now, let me ask you this, Sneed. Do you think that out of all three carriers, who might have to pay for overly ambitious goals for the end of 22?
Well, I think T-Mobile knows how to stay within their means. I think T-Mobile knows how to stay within their means. I don't think that's going to be trouble for them. I think where T-Mobile is going to have some trouble actually is on the investor side. There are a lot of checks that they have been writing that eventually have to get cashed. So everything on the investment side has been, how do we return the value to the investors? They want to do share buybacks. Who knows? I mean, they might have their heart set on a stock split in 5 years. But you can't do that without value to the stock. They still don't pay a dividend. Right. So, that's where I think things get a little fuzzy, Moose, because you have seen what Elliott management had done to AT&T. They essentially wreaked havoc on the investor side. It triggered a mass exodus of investment. But it was the straw that broke the camel's back. There were thousands of straws before,
Right.
But if we're going to be honest, everything is always based on investors. And that's what I think Mike Sievert is trying to juggle. That's what I think the executives at T-Mobile are sensitive to. They know that the target share value, I think, is set at $168 by Moffett-Nathanson.
Oh my God.
How do you get there? How do you get there, right?
Craig Moffett.
Well, okay, guy. So you know how I feel about Craig Moffett. He's wrong about everything. He's wrong about it when it comes to actual networking and carrier operations. He's wrong. He's a financial guy, right? These guys are rich, Moose. They know money. I get it, but they don't know carriers well enough from networking to know what it takes and what they need to do and such. That's pretty clear. But what I think is realistic, and this is the truth of the matter, is these carrier executives are going to move in order to get investors sinking their teeth into the stock. They simply want to make moves that are going to make people invest more money and buy more shares, because that's the future of their business. Moose, when When the share value is gone, the company will die.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for assets, where would AT&T be right now?
Oh man, it would be terrible.
How many companies can recover from a awful $60 billion transaction?
Yep.
And an even worse $100 billion transaction?
Terrible.
And still
Terrible.
be standing in the heart of a 3-horse industry.
And still making more money than
And
T-Mobile.
still growing.
And still. God,
it's
still
simply put, it's assets. That was the only reason. Any other company would have faltered.
And Sneed's been saying this since, actually, for 2 years now. Yeah. The sleepy giant.
I swear to you, Moose, people were, I'll never forget it, 2 years ago. This was like just before the pandemic started. People were saying that AT&T was going to go bankrupt. I couldn't believe my ears.
I mean, come
people
on, man.
were really writing that. I couldn't believe it. I was like, are these people out of tune with reality? AT&T go bankrupt? They own everything they operate. They don't pay anyone. There is no middleman.
It's just one of those things, man, where the people that are writing those articles, they have no idea what they're talking about.
I think sometimes it's just writing for the sake to have something to write and have people read. Yeah, you know, I operate on logic, Moose, and I don't know how to do it any other way. How many times have you been
right? How many times have you been right?
Well, Moose, it's process, right? It's logic. I'm a trained scientific educator. Right. I'm trained on scientific process, like using reasoning and logic. You don't.
But how many times have you been right? Multiple.
I mean, yeah. I mean, but using that process.
Right.
You know, I look at A and B and C and D. I don't predict things that are outlandish and unreasonable. Okay, so you remember that time, Moose, when we were arguing about the quarter that Verizon was going to have?
Yeah.
I use my logic as this. If Verizon has a really bad Q1 historically, I can, and it's been like that for 7 years, I can predict that every Q1 they're going to have a bad quarter. It's likely because it continues to happen. It's a trend, right? If they don't do anything to change that, then it's going to happen, right? Mm-hmm. They've never had a losing Q2. They've never had 2 bad quarters in a row. You predicted that they were going to have a bad Q2. Mm-hmm. And I told you would be predicting the thing that is the least likely to happen. And it didn't happen. And it was it wasn't that you were wrong to think they could have a bad quarter. They definitely could have had a bad quarter. But the reason I didn't agree with you was because you would be predicting the least likely thing to happen, which is like pick a number between 1 and 10. And 10 is the least likely to happen. It could happen, but 10 is the least likely. And then you pick 10, even though 5 is more likely to happen. You're just going to go with 10 just because. You know, like, you have to look at the process. And I think that's what they were seeing AT&T. They viewed it as a company on fire. So they just assumed that it was doom and gloom and this company was going to go out of business. Dude, AT&T never even came close to bankruptcy. AT&T was never even in bad enough financial trouble where it was going to affect their operations. That's what AT&T does. They find ways to make the money work. And they have so much of it. I mean, look at their free cash flow. It's industry best. This is the company that people predicted was going to go bankrupt 2 years ago. They have the best industry free cash flow. What company do you invest in? The one that is least likely to go in debt and go bankrupt, especially during a pandemic. Man, I haven't seen Paul in a long time. It is really good to see you, Paul. Thanks for that super sticker, man. I appreciate it. Long time. Glad to have you back here on the show, and it is good to see you, man.
Do you think...
Thanks, RFK. Appreciate it.
Do you think that Dish will have to price their plans cheaper than the cable MVNOs to attract folks?
Oh, yeah.
We're talking $25 a line. Whoa.
$25 a line is insanely low. I think they have to beat the cheapest carrier by 10%.
Okay, so yeah, $25 a line, $26, $27 a line.
Oh, on like a multiple line account?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was going to
because
say with
that's
single line, you got Verizon's best plan at 90 plus taxes and fees. You got AT&T at 85 plus taxes and fees. You got Magenta MAX
well.
80 plus taxes and fees.
What
I
about
think
Spectrum Mobile? Right, that's what
they're
I'm
not.
saying,
No, Spectrum Mobile's
dude.
not. I know, but they don't offer. They're not a power user carrier, which means they're going to attract a majority of customers, but they can only serve those that have their home internet service. So they're not everybody's option.
But they are a lot of people's option.
Wherever they serve customers for home ISP, they are.
Right.
Because they can give people $30 a line. It's not great access though, right? It's aggressively throttled and managed after 20 gigs of usage. So anybody using 20 or more is like,
See,
yeah, I signed up for this and this isn't fun after 20 gigs.
see, I believe NR and I are on the same page on this. NR's comment: cable companies, they don't mind losing money to build a consumer base. Dish will have to do the same.
Well, I believe that you sell other services that allow you to be profitable.
Mm-hmm.
And you get them in a bundle to think they're getting a deal. But the bundle just ensures that there's a more profitable revenue stream coming in with it. So I can confirm Spectrum, Xfinity, they make no money on wireless plans.
Oh yeah.
They don't
No
even
way.
want to talk about it on their earnings. I've noticed that. They don't talk about ARPU and wireless. They say nothing of the sort. Right? Because they don't make money on it. They sell at cost. But what do, Moose? They sell people the TV, they sell people the home internet, and that is profitable as shit.
Right.
Think about it, right, Moose? They are making $60 to $90 on the average home ISP plan. What do you say?
Oh,
maybe
dude.
More? You think it's over $100 on average?
Oh, dude. Yes,
wow.
It's over $100 on average.
See, I see the low end customer being at 60 and the high end customers being at like 135. So I got that like 90-ish average.
Well, with Comcast, I think it's actually higher, but for Spectrum, 70 the low end, say $69.99 after the promotion, 135 for the high end. Man, that's.
And then they sell you TV, and you pay what? You're at $200 when it's all said and done.
I saw one of my good family friends. They just switched away from Spectrum TV after so many years. TV. For 4 TVs, because remember, you have to pay per box. It's ridiculous. All the things, the internet included, and the home phone. Oh man, because the only way that they could get bundle pricing was if they had all 3 services, right? It was $350 a month, man.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
Outrageous.
Oh, that is insanity. You know what, Moose? We could probably do another show. Maybe we'll do the Monday Madness predictions next week. And then we can also talk about cable ISP relative to the mobility game. Now they're legitimate contenders, right? Taking share. In the words of the great Roger Entner, they take their SOGA, share of gross ads.
That's right.
I love that word when he says it, SOGA,
And it's true. It's a couple 100,000 per quarter now. It's a real thing.
It's a $500,000 a quarter between the two companies.
Yeah.
Xfinity and Spectrum, absolutely.
One last thing, Sneed, before we wrap. Do you predict anything before the end of the year, anything crazy to happen in regards to the FAA situation with C-band?
Yeah, they're crazy for talking crap and getting in the way. That's what I predict is they're just getting in the way. I think this launch is happening January 5th. My prediction is that they're going to look ridiculous. They continue to be a thorn in the behinds of wireless consumers across the country. They are way out of their place. They have overstepped their boundaries, and they have misrepresented a problem that does not exist. And if they are truly willing to get in the way of cellular for some conjured up, make-believe, fictional interference risk, then that's on them when they look stupid at the end of the day, and it comes back and bites them, and they're going to look ridiculous. This is completely a political play, and there's no time to waste. We're falling behind against China. They continue to innovate and lead internationally, and here we are with bad politics once again. I hope the FCC scolds them and reprimands them and dogs them in front of our representatives on Capitol Hill. Big shout out to RFK Tech. Thank you for that $5 super chat. Appreciate all that you do in supporting us, man. Thank you for everything. And also to EM Tech, thank you for your super chat. Dish needs revenue streams that create sticky accounts. TV service won't cut it long term. Totally agree. I can't see it any other way. What do you say, Moose?
100% agree. The TV service, we don't know where the base is that will never change. You know what I mean? Like there's always a security base, right? And what I mean by that is how many X millions of folks will never leave, right? We've never reached that point ever, okay, for TV. And those folks are just like you and me, Sneed. We watch several channels, right? We watch UEFA soccer, we watch basketball, we watch NFL, we watch MLB, we watch everything, right?
Right.
But do we necessarily go back in time and we get DirecTV, satellite, Dish satellite, all these other hardware? No, we do the new age streaming options. YouTube TV, DirecTV Stream, Hulu Live, multiple different ones, Fubo TV. The issue with Dish is that I honestly wouldn't recommend them to anyone because I've never used the DirecTV, the satellite portion of it, but I have used the Hopper, streaming option, right? The what's it called, Sneed? The streaming option that they have
on Dish.
Yeah, on Dish. Yeah.
The hardware is the Hopper. Everybody
Sling.
loves the
Sling TV,
streaming option.
right?
Yeah, the cord cutter option is Sling. They got the blue and the orange plans, right?
Right. I've done Sling. It's good. It's very well done app. Everything's good with it. Does it excite me? It is what it is.
What's going to excite you, right, Moose? At this point, what excites?
I had this conversation this weekend with folks similar age to me, and I asked them, why would you buy TV? And they're like, if it's anything but sports, there's no reason for me to buy TV.
Yeah, because I don't care about the local on
news.
Demand. Correct. Yeah.
I don't care about the local news. I could just buy an antenna if that's the case. Like an HD 4K and one of those antennas, and be saving money, right? Because there's still TV that way. But again, if it's not for sports, who cares? Nobody is watching that MTV nonsense, the Real Housewives of whatever the hell city. You know what I'm saying? No one's seeing the Kardashians. It's like one of those things. Who cares? And to be completely honest with you, I think maybe our generation, we still watch certain cartoon shows or anime shows, I should say, because not cartoons, like Rick and Morty, right? Or South Park, if it's live or whatever, but there's very few reasons now, to have a live TV option.
I have to agree. Moose, we're going to wrap up the show, man, but thanks for coming on, and
anytime,
thanks for the amazing conversation. It was really good. We discussed a lot of key topics, amongst the industry. Cue the music, Moose. That's right.
There it is, man.
Upon entry, upon exit. That's right.
Yeah. And, there was actually a new song that I was listening to because, it's Christmas time, it's the winters and everything like that. There's a very good collection from Samuel Kim that he did like a remix of the Imperial March with Carol the Bells. If anybody's interested, it's free on YouTube.
That's right.
So definitely something to think about. Hopefully everybody has a great week. And as everybody's thankful for the opportunity to have a conversation. I think that's the real reason the SMT exists, right? It's the voice of
That's
the
right.
people. The
Yes,
voice is heard.
that's right. It's really about the community. It's really about the ability for everybody to pull together knowledge, experiences, skill sets, connectivity, like keeping everyone in the know and staying informed. Nobody
Mhm.
likes misinformation and bad information. I think that's what it boils down to, Moose.
That's right. And the shills and all this other nonsense, the people that are haters, it really saddens me, man.
I think that
Because
means we made it, Moose. What do you think? I think
you
that
know,
makes it official. What do you think?
oh yeah, it's very true. When you have haters, you're doing something right because people are starting to hate you.
That's right. It's okay
But
though, man.
Sneed, yeah,
Keep
thank you
we
so
keep
much for your time, Sneed, as always. I
amazing.
know
Thanks,
that you're
Moose.
still working this week, so we'll definitely be talking.
We're
Lots
definitely doing
more
a show. We're
news.
doing a show Friday for sure. So we'll definitely
Yeah,
have you back on for that, and we'll bring
right
on the
on.
bearded dragon. We'll see who else. If maybe
This
RFK
Friday or next Friday?
this Friday.
Oh
We'll see.
wow, we're doing a Christmas Eve
We might have to do a
special.
Thursday night. We'll see. We'll see.
Whoa,
What
whoa,
it just depends on what people want to do. Availability is important. I don't want to intervene and impose, but I do want to offer it because some people are looking for something to do in these times. So we'll
right?
see. We'll see. But we want to wish everybody a happy holiday season. For those that celebrate Christmas, enjoy that. For those that celebrate other holidays, enjoy that. I wish you guys wealth. I wish you health. I wish you happiness with your friends and family. And I hope you get everything that you hope for and worked for. It is a Thursday show. There we go. Confirmed by the bearded dragon. And Sebi hates everyone. JK, of course you don't, Sebi. We know you, man. Yeah,
Oh, by
absolutely
the way,
tremendous.
really
Yeah.
quick before we wrap up, people have been asking about the Lambo, dog. Give us a quick update. How's the Lambo?
It's tremendous. I'm gonna have to film a little bit this week, and I'll see if I can get a couple of videos put out Wednesday, Thursday ish. So
Man,
stay tuned.
that's amazing, man.
Stay
Alrighty,
tuned.
thank you so much, Sneed. Have a
Thanks,
great night. We'll
Moose.
talk soon.
We shall see you. Hashtag replay crew. Hashtag 2Live crew. Hashtag ravioli gang. Hashtag mod squad. Hashtag Moose is the best. And what else? We got to do a different one.
I
I
like
think
that
there was
Moose
one.
Madness one. I
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
Oh, and if you guys want to see Moose every Monday, hashtag Moose Madness Mondays.
Oh, that's so cool, man. I'm telling you, man.
All right, guys, we out this piece.
Later.
Peace.